The bottle in your hand promises a technological upgrade to your biology. Sleek, pharmaceutical-grade typography covers the label, the price tag runs 3 times higher than the generic brand sitting right next to it, and a single number dominates the front, 9.5 or maybe 10. That number is the entire sales pitch. This is alkaline water, a $1.4 billion market built on a chemical paradox. Marketing for this product tells you that drinking water with a high pH can neutralize the acidity of your modern diet, optimize how your body hydrates, and rebalance your internal chemistry. What you're holding isn't sold as a beverage, it's sold as a corrective tool for a system that's supposedly out of whack. But here's the thing. Once you look past the branding and trace the industrial chemistry of what happens the moment that expensive liquid leaves the bottle, the entire value proposition falls apart. You are paying a premium for a chemical state that stops existing roughly 3 seconds after you swallow. Previous episodes covered how bottled water gets engineered for sameness, how labels obscure sourcing logistics, and how plastic breaks down over time. Today, we're examining the collision point between the industrial product and the biological processing tank that receives it. We're going to break down the physics of pH, the sheer industrial capacity of human gastric acid, and why the priciest water on the shelf gets chemically neutralized before it ever touches your bloodstream. None of this is a story about health. All of it is a story about the impossibility of defeating basic chemistry with a marketing budget. Our analysis of purified water covered how manufacturers rely on reverse osmosis to strip water down to a blank slate. Alkaline water often begins the same way, but then it goes through a secondary industrial step called electrolysis, where the water passes over electrically charged plates typically made of titanium and platinum. That process splits the stream into 2 outputs, an acidic portion, which gets discarded or repurposed for cleaning, and an alkaline portion, which gets concentrated and bottled. Hydroxide ions accumulate during this process, pushing the pH from a neutral 7 up to an 8, 9, or even 10, and the result is a liquid that qualifies as chemically basic. Essentia specifically markets their water at pH 9.5 or higher, turning that number into a premium selling point. Inside a laboratory beaker, this water behaves exactly as the label describes, holding a high pH and neutralizing weak acids on contact. None of that matters because the bottle isn't the final destination. Your stomach is. And this is where the industrial logic completely fails to account for what happens biologically. Your stomach doesn't sit there passively waiting to receive whatever you pour into it. It operates as a highly active chemical reactor built around one overriding specification, maintaining a violently acidic environment at all times. Between meals, the human stomach holds a pH somewhere between 1.5 and 3.5. And to appreciate what that means, remember that the pH scale works logarithmically. A pH of 3 carries 10 times the acidity of a pH of 4, and a pH of 1.5 approaches the corrosive strength of battery acid. Parietal cells embedded in the stomach lining generate this environment, functioning as biological pumps that secrete hydrochloric acid the moment conditions demand it. These cells operate through specialized proton pumps, technically called H plus K plus ATPase, which actively transport hydrogen ions into the gastric chamber. That acid serves 2 purposes. First, it denatures proteins for digestion, and second, it acts as a sterilization barrier that destroys bacteria, viruses, and molds entering the system. Your stomach acid is the firewall of the human body. And this is where it gets interesting, because introducing alkaline water into that environment creates a chemical mismatch of absurd proportions. Picture drinking 12 ounces of water at pH 9.5, watching it travel down the esophagus, and landing in a reservoir of gastric fluid sitting at pH 2. Neutralization kicks in instantly. Hydrochloric acid attacks the alkaline hydroxide ions, hydrogen ions from the acid latch onto hydroxide ions from the water, and the entire reaction produces nothing but water and salt. Every bit of that high pH you paid for gets annihilated. Within moments, the expensive, ionized high pH fluid becomes an acidic mixture, no different from the gastric juices already present. Even if the alkaline water nudges the stomach pH upward by some tiny fraction, the biological system catches it immediately. Feedback loops and acidity sensors line the stomach wall, and the moment pH drifts above the operational threshold, parietal cells fire up the proton pumps and dump more hydrochloric acid until the reading drops back to target. You aren't alkalizing your body. You're giving your stomach a trivial reason to work a fraction of a second harder to hold its baseline acidity. That system wins this fight every single time. And that brings us to the sensation people describe when they drink this water. Plenty of consumers say alkaline water tastes smoother or feels slippery going down. Our episode on why water tastes sweet or plastic explored how thermal degradation changes flavor. But here, the sensation comes from chemistry alone. Acidity registers as sharp or tart on the tongue, while alkalinity produces a slippery feeling, similar to how soap feels against your skin, because soap is alkaline. That smooth mouthfeel when you drink high pH water is genuine. What's actually happening is the pH interacting with the mucous membranes of your mouth and throat, and that sensation dies the instant the liquid passes through the lower esophageal sphincter. Smoothness stays on the surface. Nothing systemic reaches beyond it. One specific case exists where this chemistry does hold up, and the industry cites it constantly to prop up the broader claims. That case involves the enzyme pepsin. Pepsin breaks down proteins during digestion and thrives in acidic conditions. People suffering from laryngopharyngeal reflux, where stomach contents creep back up into the throat, can end up with pepsin lodged in the tissues of the esophagus, which causes real damage over time. The 2012 Koufman study, published in the Annals of Otology, Rhinology, and Laryngology, showed that water at a pH of 8.8 could permanently inactivate pepsin on contact in vitro laboratory conditions. That mechanism checks out chemically. Alkaline water hitting pepsin in the throat can wash it away or shut it down. But notice where this works. The throat. This is a topical application, basically plumbing maintenance for the pipe leading down to the tank. Once the water drops into the tank itself, the benefit vanishes. Alkaline water cannot deactivate the acidity of the stomach, and you wouldn't want it to. Successfully neutralizing your stomach acid would shut down digestion and strip away your body's primary defense against foodborne pathogens. Here's where the biggest misunderstanding in the entire sector lives. Marketing for alkaline water depends on consumers confusing stomach pH with blood pH. Proponents claim that drinking alkaline water will alkalize your blood, shifting your body into a state that resists disease. From a system standpoint, that outcome is physically impossible under normal operating conditions. Blood pH ranks among the most tightly controlled variables in all of human biology, locked between 7.35 and 7.45 at all times. A reading below 7.35 means acidosis, a reading above 7.45 means alkalosis, and both qualify as medical emergencies capable of killing you. Your body runs a sophisticated buffering system specifically to prevent your diet from ever moving that number. The bicarbonate buffer system, involving carbonic acid and bicarbonate ions, works alongside your lungs regulating pH by expelling carbon dioxide, and kidneys handling it by excreting excess acids or bases through urine. Drinking enough alkaline water to theoretically shift your blood chemistry just triggers the kidneys to filter out the excess bicarbonate and flush it into the toilet. What you end up with is expensive water processed into expensive urine. The internal set point stays exactly where it always sat. Given that the biology negates the product, the growth of this market still demands an explanation. Essentia, one of the leading alkaline brands, reached hundreds of millions in sales before Nestlé acquired it. And the answer to why connects back to the labeling regulations we covered in our label loophole episode. The FDA regulates bottled water identity, not what that water does physiologically. When a bottle reads pH 9.5, the manufacturer carries a legal obligation to ensure the water measures pH 9.5 at bottling time. They test the liquid inside the container. No requirement exists for them to demonstrate what that liquid accomplishes inside the human body. The label describes the product's industrial state, not its biological outcome. That regulatory gap opens the door to confusing alkalinity, which is just pH with buffering capacity. And this distinction in chemistry is one most consumers never encounter. A water can register a high pH while carrying almost no buffering capacity, meaning it holds very few mineral ions to actually neutralize acid. Think of it like comparing a flashlight to a floodlight, where both produce light, but one packs no real power behind it. Many ionized alkaline waters display high pH alongside low mineral content, which makes them chemically weak. One drop of stomach acid can neutralize an entire glass. Compare that to a natural mineral water like Gerolsteiner or San Pellegrino, which might register a lower pH but carry massive buffering capacity because of the calcium and bicarbonates packed inside. The water that never mentions alkaline on the label might actually neutralize more acid than the one that does, purely because it carries greater mineral density to absorb the protons. None of that matters to the industry because a number sells easier than an explanation. The figure 9.5 looks like a score, like a grade. Explaining high buffering capacity due to bicarbonate load is a chemistry lecture. The market picks the simple number every time, and this is where it gets worse, because chasing that number introduces new variables into the supply chain. As we covered in our breakdown of the black stuff recall, complexity breeds failure. Achieving high alkalinity artificially means you can't just bottle tap water. You have to process it, add electrolytes, ionize it, and every single step creates another failure point. The worst example of this kind of system failure involved a brand called Real Water, a premium alkaline product sold in distinctive boxy blue bottles and marketed as the ultimate health water. Between late 2020 and 2021, that product got linked to dozens of cases of non-viral hepatitis and acute liver failure, and one person died. Investigators found that the pursuit of alkalinity had compromised basic safety protocols. Real Water relied on a complex manufacturing process involving titanium tubes and chemical concentrates, and in the push to maintain the specific chemical profile printed on the label, they bypassed standard kill steps like proper filtration or acidification that would normally wipe out contaminants. Most bottled water gets treated with ozone or slightly acidified to prevent bacterial growth. When your entire selling point revolves around high pH, acidifying the water becomes impossible. You've removed one of the primary safety barriers the industry relies on. Real Water represents an extreme outlier, but the incident confirms a basic rule of industrial systems. The more you manipulate a natural resource to force it into a marketing category, the more risk enters the process. Regular water keeps things simple. Engineered alkaline water stacks complexity on top of complexity, and complexity is where the dangerous variables hide. On top of all that, there's the shelf life of the pH itself. Our episode on how water doesn't expire but the plastic does covered the fact that these containers are permeable. Carbon dioxide floats in the atmosphere all around us, and over time CO2 migrates through the plastic wall of the PET bottle and dissolves into the water, forming carbonic acid in the process. A bottle that leaves the factory reading pH 9.5 might sit in a warehouse for 6 months, absorbing CO2, and arrive at the grocery store reading pH 8.5 or 8. The carbonic acid formation directly counteracts the alkalinity you paid for. Alkalinity degrades on the shelf the same way structural integrity degrades in the plastic. You're fighting the atmosphere on top of fighting your own stomach. Consumers also pay for the perception of better hydration. Marketing frequently claims that alkaline water hydrates faster or more efficiently, and this ties into what's technically called the micro-clustering claim, the idea that ionization shrinks water clusters to a size cells can absorb more easily. From a physics and chemistry standpoint, water molecules constantly associate and disassociate with each other and never form static clusters that could be mechanically sized for cellular absorption. Water absorption in the human body depends on osmolarity, meaning the concentration of solids, not the shape or geometry of the molecule itself. When the Mayo Clinic and Harvard Health say no evidence supports these claims, they're pointing to the absence of clinical data. Looking at the industrial mechanism reveals something even more damning. The claim doesn't align with how liquid water actually behaves at a molecular level. All of which brings us back to the aisle where you're standing. Tap water sits on one side, strictly regulated by the EPA. Standard purified water occupies the middle, which amounts to tap water run through reverse osmosis. Alkaline water fills the premium shelf space, and it's purified water run through an ionizer and remineralized. The price gap between them is steep. The physiological gap is basically zero. Drinking the alkaline water introduces a weak base into a strong acid factory, where your stomach detects the input, neutralizes it on contact, and carries on working. Blood pH stays exactly where your lungs and kidneys dictate it should stay through the bicarbonate buffer system. That smooth taste you enjoy is real, but it's a momentary sensory experience rather than a medical event. Alkaline water isn't dangerous in the general case, setting aside disasters like the real water scandal. And if you enjoy the taste and can afford the markup, the system will happily keep selling it to you. But if you're watching this as someone trying to understand industrial systems, you should see the transaction clearly. You aren't buying a health outcome. You're buying a manufacturing process, paying for the electricity that splits the water, the titanium plates that ionize it, and the plastic bottle that struggles to keep atmospheric CO2 from undoing the whole thing. Neutralization of your investment begins the moment you swallow. The company sells the water, and your stomach destroys the alkalinity, and both of those systems are performing exactly as designed. This pattern keeps showing up across our investigation of the water industry, the gap between what the label says and what the logistics deliver. Spring water that originates from a borehole miles from any spring, purified water that sheds nanoplastics from its own filters, alkaline water that converts to salt inside your stomach. The product never turns out to be as clean or as simple as the packaging wants you to believe. The most advanced filtration system on the planet doesn't sit inside a bottling plant. It operates inside your own body, and it couldn't care less about the marketing printed on the bottle.